where we would sit in a room, sometimes square, sometimes rounded ceiling, facing a wall, and behind us was either a person or mechanical device that would transmit information and indoctrinate us about who and what we are, what our goals and lessons were to be, what we were to experience. And at times in front of us on this blank white wall, as the voice would speak and indoctrinate, there would be the scene or the image of what we were hearing, as if it were a living movie. And then sometimes we'd be thrown right into that movie to participate in it. And this went on for quite a number of years. And during that time period, many physical anomalies occurred with me. I had internal bleeding. My eyesight completely diminished so that I could not see physical reality. All I could see were the energy fields that emanated from people, places, and things. I would see colors and symbols that emanated from the mind pattern. It was like reading a sentence. Every time I would see a person or go into public, everything about that person would be right there for me to perceive. And imagine, this is just a small group of people, relatively, picking up all of your information, where you were born, where you came from, what you're going to do, what's going to happen to you, and even what you were in other existences, what I refer to as simultaneous existences. And so it became very hard to deal with physical reality in life. And so towards the middle 1980s, I would become very interested in drinking and becoming an alcoholic. I tried to commit suicide several times. It was not a very pleasant life. I had a very difficult marriage, difficulty with my children. And finally, when things were getting really, really bad, and Peter referred to experiences where I was really entrapped in a legal situation and threatened to be placed in a mental institution for the rest of my life, or even in prison for the rest of my life if I didn't say and do certain things.
Your life from when you were 13 to when you discovered what this was all about must have been a living hell for you.
Well, sometimes it still is. You know, you never really come out of that. I have created a protocol of deprogramming that I teach others, but of course I spent many years doing that to myself, and I still have a ways to go. I am under no circumstances totally deprogrammed. It's a lifelong effort to reclaim your own mind and find out who and what you really are, and that's what I do in my work now, for myself and others.
Human beings, and many of you heard this from me before, use less than 10% of their brain capacity. So what happens when you open up that other 90%, or even a portion of that other 90%? Imagine your capabilities and the things that you can do. Bilocation, astral projection, hyperspace work, etc., etc. Complete mental understanding of everything that exists. Everything you ever need to know is already in your mind pattern. That's what the people at Montauk understood, that everything that exists is already in your mind pattern. Montauk took the individual, and my estimation, I know it may differ than other people may have said in the past, but I estimated there were approximately, over the 13 years it existed, about 300,000 people used in the experimentation over those 13 years. And I'm talking about just individuals who were actually physically at the location and worked on individually. Now, of that 300,000 or so, I was told that less than 1% actually survived. So you can do the math. It comes out to just about less than 3,000 people in the world who are walking around right now who actually survived Montauk. And I also understand that there's many people out there who claim to be part of Montauk, and many of them have been in some capacity. But I will tell you that from my own personal experience in that location, almost all of the subjects or targets were male. There were very few female people that were used in the mind control.
Stewart, you write about the Illuminati, and that behind all of this sinister research and use of all of this technology in this way is a group called the Illuminati. Who are the Illuminati?
Make a long story short, there are 13 families that control the resources and the entire planet. And they have their ancestry goes all the way back to Sumerian times. And where they changed into the Babylonians, they became the Khazars. They entered into Europe, where they merged with the Celtic remnants or the Atlantean refugees, which became the Merovingians. And then that, over the centuries, broke into 13 distinct families that controlled Europe at the time, and then now the entire planet.
But before the Illuminati were the reptilians?
The reptilians were the first colonists on this world. They, for all intents and purposes, own this planet, and that's how they still think. And they are still here. Of course, they were colonizing a continent called Lemuria, which no longer exists. They went underground or into the inner earth, and then they started coming up during the Sumerian times, interbreeding, hybridizing the population so that there's a human and reptilian genetics in all of us. Each one of us has reptilian genetics. And you can see this as a fetus develops in the womb. During the first few weeks of existence, the fetus is an androgynous reptilian, and only then is mammalian genetics opened up in it, proving the hybridization.
So the Illuminati, who are this 13, and are there names to these families?
Yes, you know, you have the Windsors, the Rothschilds, the Romanov, the Sinclairs. There's a very wide range of Illuminati, but even more so is the range underneath the 13, which is the Committee of 300, which are 300 families that work very closely in association with the Illuminati to accomplish the goals.
You mentioned that in your book, that another way of describing the Illuminati is the New World Order.
Yeah.
And you do, part of your seminar, you ask people to remove a dollar bill. Could you describe that?
Yes.
This and then there's a space, and then there's the rest of it. This is the all-seeing eye of Osiris. Why is that on American money? And there's wrinkled skin around it, like it was a reptilian eye. And here's the Committee of 300, who keep a space between the Illuminati and the rest of you peons. And here's all the rest of you, especially here. Serious, not even funny. Now, years ago, there used to be a banner under this that said, E pluribus unum, one for all. What does it say now? Novus ordem seclorum. New World Order. Did you notice? Did they put that in the newspaper? Look at your dollar bill, and you'll see it.
As we walk up to this massive radar tower, what are you feeling?
Well, you know, it does bring back a lot of the memories from 30 some odd years ago. It was very different back then than it is now. Now it looks old and decrepit, and in those days, I remember in front of the base they had this huge Air Force jet that was on display and surrounded by a fence, which I see is gone now. It's just, it's kind of like when you see stories of the concentration camp victims going back to the concentration camps, and you know, it became a park, and it's not the same as it used to be. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition of visual and memory and time and space, and it's a very strange feeling.
Stewart, the technology from that radar dish, they would beam messages that people would receive and perceive as being their own thoughts.
Correct. They tested it initially here in the local area, especially in the wintertime when there were no tourists, and the town was pretty much empty. There weren't that many year-round locals. And then ultimately, as we got into the late 70s, they started transmitting up to satellites that would then beam that message or whatever they were transmitting back down to either specific areas on the planet or even to specific individuals. And they tested that out for a number of years.
These grounds now are open. It's part of New York State. And we were talking about this, the theory of of a place that was for many years off limits. As we see, there are certain areas of this park that are closed. But what's your theory of why they opened it up?
Well, I always go to